Dang, what the hell, bro?
On the flight deck, bombs test 5Z, primary flight control. Testing 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1. Test complete.
Yeah. Hey. Okay. Woo. Okay. Yeah. I do not miss. Hey. Started from Cali and now I got bitches in Europe. They singing my shit. Remember, it's never the critic who counts. That's just the way that it is. Huh. Tell me, why would I listen to you on this shit when you never could do what I did? Ahead of the curve. For me to put pen down to paper, you gotta show me that you know what I'm worth. Yeah. Own all my masters, I'm never signing a 360. It's 10 for the verse, 10 for the watch. Shooter like her, I've been a boss ever since birth. I got a check, Vaccarello made the shirts. I really feel like I'm chosen, yeah. Balling out like I'm the Rosen, yeah. Fuck up the game, need a Trojan, huh. My baby deep like the ocean, yeah. Baby, I seen this already, this ain't nothing new. We done came up, but it's still the same crew. Titans of industry, pillars of stone. Right when we spoke it, we already knew. Hey. Right when we spoke it, we already knew. I do not miss, I do not miss, I do not miss. Hey, started from Cali and now I got bitches in Europe. They singing my shit. Remember, it's never the critic who counts. That's just the way that it is. Huh. Tell me, why would I listen to you on this shit when you never could do what I did? Yeah, ain't got no time for no breaks. I had to do it my way. Yes, he'll never make it. That shit is too basic. What bitch say it straight to my face. Nothing to think about, I'ma be great. Most of you don't wanna do what it takes. Say that you want it, the louder the voice, the cheaper the words, you in the same place. They know that I'm 101, number 4 and undercome. If I want it, I just make it happen. If I speak it, it's already done. Gotta confess, everything coming my way, I'ma take off the table, don't give me no less.
Give me no less.
I do not miss. Hey, started from Cali and now I got bitches in Europe. They singing my shit. Remember, it's never the critic who counts. That's just the way that it is. Huh. Tell me, why would I listen to you on this shit when you never could do what I did?
Was there anything at all surprising about it to you? Not one bit. Then all my level.
Woo!
Again, Eevee, you got to turn on things to try to make it look realistic, whereas Cycles is realistic by default. All right, so let's do some materials now. Okay, let's get into it. With my icing here selected, I'm going to click the material icon here, and I'll move this up so my head's not blocking everything, and I will add a new material. Okay, now we'll get more into materials later on, but you can see there's a lot of settings here, a lot. Now this is the principled shader. It's actually based off of Disney's principled BSDF paper they put out. It's pretty high tech. It actually makes things very simple to create a realistic material. You used to have to, for any material, like add nodes, like diffuse, and then I want some reflection. I have to add some reflection. I have to do this, and then tweak it with a Fresnel, and it was really complex, really complex. This is one of the key things that's enabled a lot of beginners and people to start making things faster, because it's now built into one shader and it automatically adjusts to the correct measurements, like roughness and reflection and everything, depending on what other values are. So it's really good. The one that you're probably looking for just color is base color. So I'll just set that to a nice pink color. All right.
Hold on. So I just gotta just click on that and go down to what did I miss?
Light is bouncing around. Eevee, none of that. So what do you want? You might prefer the Eevee one. You might be totally fine with it, needing to use that, right? That darkening of the effect there. So again, Eevee, you got to turn on things to try to make it look realistic, whereas Cycles is realistic by default. All right, so let's do some materials now. Okay, let's get into it. With my
Eevee, okay.
Icing here selected, I'm going to click the material icon here, and I'll move this up so my head's not blocking everything, and I will add a new material. Okay, now we'll get more into materials later on, But
Hello?
you can see there's a lot of settings here, a lot. Now, this is the principled shader. It's actually based off of Disney's principled BSDF paper they put out. It's pretty high tech. It actually makes things very simple to create a realistic material. You used to have to, for any material, like add nodes, like diffuse, and then I want some reflection. I have to add some reflection. I have to do this,
like
this, and then tweak it with a Fresnel, and it was really
Unreal.
complex.
I think
really
you still had to do
complex.
that on Unreal.
This is one of the key things that's enabled a lot of beginners and people to start making things faster, because it's now built into one shader and it automatically adjusts
Blend
to
is
the
way easier.
correct measurements, like roughness and reflection and everything, depending on what other values are. So it's really good. The one that you're probably looking for just color is base color.
Base color.
So I'll just set that to a nice pink color. All right. Then the other big one you change a lot is roughness down here. And this is the glossiness. It's often, roughness and glossy values. Different renderers call them different things. Glossy, is what other renderers call it. Roughness, they're inverts of each other. Basically, glossy is the invert of roughness, but they do it's the same sort of thing. So I want this is like how wet, like how freshly iced do you want your donut to look? I find it like, okay, real icing, it's probably more around about a
would need a better
0.25 or
GPU
something like
too.
that. But I like it to look a little wet. It looks,
Let me turn down the intensity of the light. I think that is way too high. If I can do that again, like, please. Should be somewhere here. Right. Properties, yep. Okay. I'm just gonna lower that down. So it's not too much. I mean, it's super close and like actually massive. Is that better? I don't think that's better at all. That's even worse. It's just the quality kind of sucks. I think mostly because I don't have a. It's just the way my GPU is. If I had like a better GPU, it would look better. But this is processing in real time, so it's like a lot of work, I'm sure. Oh. Okay, let me try this and see what it looks like. Okay, that's not too bad. It's not too bad. Not bad at all. Alright, so it looks way better when I do that. Right? It's not shaky and everything, but yeah. Try cycles. That's gonna take a while. That's the best I can do. What if we denoise it a little bit? There we go. I like that. That's better actually. Man, that looks good. That looks good. I could eat it already. Doesn't even look like a donut, but I'm gonna set this back. Wait, what is experimental? Alright, back to UV. I mean, this doesn't look too bad at all. Trace precise. Not precise. Alright, circle back. Here's what I hit. Sometimes I get into this and I just like start messing around with it instead of like trying to keep going. Yeah, I mean, I figured new things out, but like I wanna get through the tutorial and actually figure things out more. Okay, the donut. Let's get back to the donut. Icing. That's what I want. All right, and color. Roughness. Don't want to make it shine. Oof. Okay. Roughness. Let me just, I'm gonna go back to,
In my opinion, more delicious when it's got some wetness to it. We'll get more into it as we do other things later on, but just as a basics. Then for my donut, I'll add another material. Let's just add a basic color to it. And again, we'll do more with this later on. And then why not just make it interesting? We're not even going to use this plane in the final render. This is just so that we've got something. But I like it to look a little wet. It looks, in my opinion, is base color. So I'll just set that to a nice pink color. All right. Then the other big one you change a lot is roughness down here. And this is the glossiness. It's often, yeah, roughness and glossy values. Different renderers call them different things. Glossy, yeah, is what other renderers call it. Roughness, color. So I'll just set that to
yeah, whatever.
nice pink color. All right. Then the other big one you change a lot is roughness down here. And this is the glossiness. It's often, yeah, roughness and glossy values. Different renderers call them different things. Glossy, yeah, is what other renderers call it. Roughness. They're inverts of each other. Basically, glossy is the invert of roughness, but they do it's the same sort of thing. So I want a, you know, this is like how wet, like how freshly iced do you want your donut to look? I find it like, okay, real icing, it's probably more around about like a 0.25 or something like that. But I like it to look a little wet. It looks, in my opinion, more delicious when it's got some wetness to it. We'll get more into it as we do other things later on, but just as a basics. Then for my donut, I'll add another material. Let's just add a basic color to it. And again, we'll do more with this later on. And then why not just make it interesting? We're not even going to use this plane in the final render. This is just so that we've got something nice to look at right now. And let's hit a render. Okay, cool. Now, oh, by the way, I didn't even mention this, but there's slots. So when you're rendering, if you just want to like quickly preview two different things, you could change slots like up to 8. So if you want to open up a new slot, you just switch to that slot first, and then you hit render, and then it'll save it into that slot. In my case, I'm going to put it in slot 2 again to override my cycles one, and I'll switch back to cycles.
Hold on. What the
I'm
fuck?
going to put it like up to 8. Quickly preview
I don't
2
see
different things. You could change slots.
the option here.
Like up to 8. So if you want to open up a new slot, you just switch to that slot first. That's something nice to look at right now. And let's hit a render. Okay.
Oh, okay. I gotta do that first. Man, it's so weird having the same color as the donut, the icing. I mean, I'm just gonna make it blue. It's so much easier to see. Yeah. Let's get the roughness of this one a little bit. Right. All right, that's it.
Cool. Now, oh, by the way, I didn't even mention this, but there's slots. So when you're rendering, if you just want to like quickly preview 2 different things, you could change slots like up to 8. So if you want to open up a new slot, you just switch to that slot first, and then you hit render, and then it'll save it into that slot. In my case, I'm going to put it in slot 2 again to override my cycles one, and I'll switch back to cycles. Okay, now the plot thickens. We have true reflections with our cycles rendering engine. Okay.
Let me try. Mm. How the fuck do I delete this? The huh. Yeah, I guess I can't.
It's ray tracing. Okay, so it's calculating the reflection of the end of our plane here, and you can see we've got some shine there. Now you can do that with Eevee, thank goodness, by turning it on.
Damn. Night and day. Crazy. Hmm. Okay. Send it back. Hmm. I feel like I should increase it, right? Just so that it can use more memory. Nah, it's fine.
So again, some things you have to turn on: screen space reflections. And now you can see I've got a little bit of reflections coming off it. Okay. Something else you might want to turn on is bloom. That is sort of the, what would you call it? Like glare. Some things you have to turn on. So you've got some shine there. Now you can do that with Eevee, thank goodness, by turning it on. So again, some things you have to turn on.
Wait, what does it do? High brightness pixels generated a glow effect. Okay. So that should be okay. Okay. I think this is.
Screen space reflections. And now you can see I've got a little bit of reflections coming off it. Okay. Something else you might want to turn on is bloom. That is sort of the, what would you call it? Like glare, maybe? Glare.
Yeah,
I'm not
I don't
really
like-
an
I
EV
don't like
guy, to
blue.
be honest. I don't use it that often, but it's something you could turn on to add a little bit of glare to it or something like that. But there you go. So we got that, and then we got the cycles one. And it's, you start to understand it. Okay. Now let's add in something of this scale and of this material quality, which is icing, which if you've ever looked at my ear, for example, or anyone's ear in direct sunlight, you can often see through it. Can I get it so that you can see through it? Nah. Okay. But you get like, you see like the blood vessels and like your ears glow red in sunlight, right? That
Yeah.
is scattering. It's light that is scattering through a surface. You see it, like that's the example everyone gives, an ear. But also you see it in things like a glass of milk. You see light start to like enter into it and sort of diffuse through the milk. Well, something of this scale and this type of material does the same thing. And it kind of feels hard, like the donut feels hard, like it's almost like it's made of concrete or something. It's because it doesn't have any of that scattering. So that is this value, subsurface scattering. So if I increase this to a
That's how you do that, huh? Where is it again?
let's try subsurface scattering.
Okay. Yeah. Wait a minute. Wait. All right. I should do it. I don't think I need too much. I think that's about all I need. All right, let me try again. See.
So if I increase this to let's try 0.1.
This is way too much. Your donut is basically
This
glowing.
radius here, you can see that it's changed it. It looks terrible.
Yeah.
This radius here is actually in meters. Like how far does it scatter in meters?
Oh shit.
Shouldn't scatter that far. And it's also why there are three of them. That's the red channel, green channel, blue channel, which is probably, I don't know why it split it like that. Probably because of mass and the fact that, different rays will spread at different wavelengths, like distances. I don't know. But either way, I just change all of them at once, which you can do by dragging down over the values. And then I just adjust it to, I'll just enter it in 0.002, which is really, what is that? Is that millimeters? Hang on. Let's try this. 2 mil. Oh, you can't enter it in here, even though it is actually like in millimeters. But let's go 0.02. I think that is millimeters. No, that's 2 centimeters. 0.02. Okay, there we go. That's 2 millimeters. I try not to diverge from the script, Andrew. I've rehearsed this before. All right. Now you can't see much here, and part of that is also because the subsurface color is the one that it is looking for. So what color should it be when it scatters through something? I usually make this like a more saturated version of the base color. I don't know if that's technically accurate, but it's sort of what I do. And then this subsurface value here would basically control like how much scattering do you want to have happen. So this is what it looks like before. I'm going to do another one right here. And let's just see now that we compare it, okay? So not much difference. And look, it's pretty hard to tell on something of this type of material. You will notice it a lot better when we've got the sprinkles on top, because we'll be able to see the shadows and everything like that. But you might be able to see a little bit there. I don't know. Anyways, then I'll do another one with cycles, because why not? And I'm going to be sticking to cycles for the rest of the tutorial until maybe the end. I'll try and sort of make it more compatible towards the end. But I generally try to stick to cycles because it does make it simple. And if you've got a card that can perform it well, it's pretty nice. It does. You will notice a difference right, in overall quality with cycles. But again, I know it's not for everyone. So there are the two options for you. So, by the way, here's something else that you can do. So the material view that I mentioned, this preview mode, it is using an HDR, which is cool because you can see like the reflections on it and you can see the shape and you can understand how this would be helpful for building a material. You can tweak it and see everything in real time. It's great. If you change it to scene lights, it will take advantage of the lights that you have in your scene. And then if you check this button, Scene World, it is now taking advantage of everything, the whole world as well. So there is actually no difference between if you've got those two things checked and actually just using Eevee. So if I switch that to Eevee, you can see that I can swap between these. There is no difference.
That doesn't look good at all. I don't know what that is. This does not look good at all. What the hell? Oh my god. I'm just trying to figure out why that looks like that. I don't know why. I do not know why. Hmm. Hmm. I like it. All right, well,
So what that means is I can keep my rendering engine to cycles. And then if I just want to preview everything in EV, I can keep it there. And then I can swap to cycles when I need it over here. Haha. Okay. I mentioned I was going to talk about samples. So that's what this grain is, okay? So the way path traces work is that
let me go through that again because I wasn't paying attention.
switch that to EV, you can see that I can swap between these. There is no difference. So what that means is I can keep my rendering engine to cycles. And then if I just want to preview everything in EV, I can keep it there. And then I can swap to cycles when I need it over here. Haha.
Big brain. This guy's a genius.
Okay. I mentioned I was going to talk about samples. So that's what this grain is, okay? So the way path traces work is that, oh God, how technical do you want to get? It's a Monte Carlo Russian roulette system where it's, it gets really, really complex. But basically, it samples, it starts grainy and then it gradually refines the image to try to arrive at a repeatable, predictable result. Basically. So you can see it's starting to get grainy and then it eventually resolves and it says rendering done. So it says rendering done when it has reached its max samples right here. And you can see there are two settings here. You've got viewport and you've got render. So when I hit render, that's why it was taking a little bit longer because the max samples is 4 times as high. Now for something of this size, you don't need that many samples. In fact, yes, there is grain here, but there is a secret weapon that we have not engaged yet, and that is the denoiser.
Yeah.
So the denoiser it's using AI to try to smooth out the image without having to arrive at that final image, okay? So I can set my max sample to something low, like 100. And then when I move, you can see that it previously it had to get to like 4,000 to try to like get rid of the noise. Now at just 100 samples, it's cleared it all up. It is miraculous. This is one of the biggest, what NVIDIA did, and I'm sure it wasn't just NVIDIA, a whole bunch of companies create different denoisers. But introducing this to all the softwares for people that have NVIDIA cards, that's why they did it for free, was one of the biggest leaps forward for rendering, honestly. Like the fact that you can now just render with cycles at a low sample count means that it's crazy. You can use it for so much more now.
It's crazy.
This one's going a little bit. But anyways, so that's viewport. Now, here's the thing. With the viewport, you'll notice that watch how slow the samples climb up when you've got denoising turned on versus when I turn it off. Okay, so the denoiser, by the way, you can change the denoiser to be CPU based and it'll be really slow. That's the Intel Open denoiser one. Automatic will use basically optics if you have a compatible card, or you can just set it to optics. But anyways, it will slow it down because it's trying to do a denoise as well as sampling, and it's slowing it down. It is nice, but yeah, it will slow it down. So what I like to do is set the starting sample to something high, like 50. And then that way, at least it gets through all, because at the lowest value of 1, it's too noisy to understand anyway, to try to start it then. So I set it at 50, and then that way I can move around and it won't slow down the grain clearing up, basically. And that's viewport. So I'm going to do the exact same thing over here. Denoiser. I'll set it to optics. Thank you very much. That's interesting. I didn't actually know that was defaulting as the Intel one. Who knows? It doesn't really matter because the Intel one is slower, but it's only doing it once when you're hitting render. So it's probably not that big of a difference whether you use that or that. But anyways, then I'm going to set my rendering engine, my max samples of my engine to 100 as well.
Yeah.
And let's see how fast it does this. Okay.
Damn. Well, I mean, it's halfway through already. That's pretty impressive. Not gonna lie. Holy shit. Alright. I'm gonna give it a try. Cool, 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 cool. This is awesome.
Oh, compared to the 4,000 samples before, it's now doing it in 3 seconds. Okay. And how long was the, yeah, so obviously it is still much slower than the EV one, because the EV one is real time, but like 3 seconds, that's pretty dang fast. That's not bad.
Yeah.
So it's not big of a difference. I probably should have also mentioned these sample settings. It is a cycles only thing. Yes, there are samples in Eevee. It does say sample counts, but it's a different sort of sample. It's not the same. Like, it's basically samples are a concern with cycles, really, mostly. So that's really, you see a lot of people caring about samples, because the higher the samples you go, that's like, it's going to go longer and longer and longer to clear the grain, basically, right? If I turn off the denoise thing, right? If I set this to 0, it's just going to keep rendering forever and ever. Oh, no. Oh, because of noise threshold, it's now actually arriving at a result. But you could just leave it going forever and ever and ever. So, yeah, some people, like, especially for, like, production scenes, you'll spend a long time, like, coming in here and just finding, like, the exact, amount of samples that you can get away with. Because maybe I didn't mention, but yeah, the higher the samples, the clearer the picture, and the more, like, the better it will look, but the longer it will take. So you generally want to use the least amount of samples as possible. That's viewport, of course. The render one is the one that really matters for your render. Okay, now there's noise threshold. Okay, so this used to be called adaptive sampling in previous versions, I think. Noise threshold. This means, you can hover over it and see it, but basically it's trying to read the image and stop adding samples where it's not needed. So usually samples are needed for, like, shadowy areas and areas of, like, lots of caustics and refractions and things. But areas where it's receiving a lot of light, not a lot of bounce light, like, for example, the top of this donut, it could get away with using less samples. So this adaptive thing is trying to find what that value should be. Before stopping, basically. So, I mean, I really don't play with it that often. I sort of just leave it at the default. If you set it at 0, it will try to do it automatically based on the number of samples that you've got. I mean, really, I'm just going to leave it at the default. It's not really that big of a deal. But what that means is that now, with it turned on, you get this minimum value. So the min value means it will override this, so that if for whatever reason it's doing, like, it's skipping a part that still looks noisy, but you go like, oh, you should at least chuck in, 15 samples. You could do that. But yeah, if you turned off that adaptive sampling, it would just go by, like, it's going to do everything at 600 samples regardless. So this will do it like that. Anyways, for something like a donut, I mean, look, we don't need to go that high. I mean, like 100 or 200 I might use for my final, but that's probably it. It doesn't need to be that much. Oh, and 3.0 now has a new feature of time limit. So if you just want to, like, override all of these settings basically and go like, I only want to give you 2 seconds to render. So whatever you can do in 2 seconds, like, do it. Not including scene build time, so that's why it's still over 2. But you can let's try that. Maybe go 1, 1 second. You could do that if you wanted. There you go. Anyways, that's a little bit about rendering, everyone. So as I said, I'm going to be using Cycles for this tutorial to get the final result, but we're going to be building it in Eevee. So you can render in Eevee. If you just want to stick to Eevee, go for it. You'll find that it should look fairly well. I'll be swapping to it every now and then, so I might be adjusting some of the settings later on. But if you want to use Eevee and stick to it for the final image, you are welcome to. But yeah, that's a bit of rendering and materials and all that good stuff. So we're going to be delving into it far deeper as we go into it. But first, we're going to be adding some sprinkles. That's the next big hurdle for our donut project. So go ahead, click on the screen, and we're going to be learning all about the new geometry nodes. So click there, and I'll see you in the video. Okay, I spoke out of turn. I know I said in the last part we were going to do geometry nodes. Got ahead of myself. Sorry to excite you. Texturing and shading comes first because it is much more essential. In this case, for example, our donut, we've just got solid colors, and that's okay for our icing, but our donut base here is a solid, almost canary yellow. That's definitely the wrong shade of donut. Real Donuts, bringing up some reference photos. By the way, this extra software here, I haven't mentioned it, PureRef. It's what all 3D artists use to manage reference. You can just like paste in images from the internet and then just create like a canvas and then like rearrange things. And it's really, really fantastic. But anyways, I've just got 2 photos here. Real Donuts, they're not just one solid color, right? As we spoke about in the last part, no, not last part, but the modeling part, right? Where we created that part that like indents it. Because of the way donuts are cooked, you have some parts that are going to receive less hot fat that it's sitting in when it's cooking. So this middle part, and it's most visible here, can often be lighter than the rest. Okay, that's one aspect of it. But then also, the rest of the donut isn't one solid color either. It's also got, light patches, brown patches, little speckledy bits and things all over it. And that can add interest. And you might not think you would see it. If you were to do a render up here, you really wouldn't. But we're going to have our donut spinning around on a turntable. So we do need to see it because we're going to see the backside of it. So it's just a great opportunity to just learn about textures and shaders and things a little bit better. So we don't need our icing, so I'm going to hide that just by hitting H, or I think I mentioned this before, but you can also do it up here in the outliner, just clicking the little eye there. We'll just hide it. Hotkey to bring anything back that has the material, the little eye disabled, it's Alt-H. So hide with H or Alt-H to bring it back. Anyways, okay. So this is our donut here. Okay. Now we spoke a little bit about the materials over here. I mean, really all we changed was just the base color, and we did some subsurface scattering for the icing, and we also used the roughness down here. I would say, by the way, that all these values here, they're like confusing, and a lot of artists can like get really into the weeds with it. Like if you just stick to the base color, the roughness value, and then the normal map, which we'll get to in a bit for bump mapping, that's really like 90% of the materials you make will use just those 3 things: base color, roughness, and normal mapping. But anyways, okay. Now this material view here that we've got here, you can see if you wanted to add in image textures and like combine things and whatever, this thing would get very bloated and very like annoying and frustrating to use. And actually the old version of Blender, like 2.49, which was like 10 years ago, you had to do everything in this sort of this view here. Thankfully, we don't have to do that anymore. There is a node editor, which you can access by hitting the shader tab at the top of your window there. That'll take you to the shader workspace, which will load up all these extra windows and things. I think mine is set to solid view shading by default, but yours was probably this one. But yeah, it's loaded up a bunch of extra windows here. I actually don't need the ones on the left-hand side. I never need them. So I'm actually going to click and drag across to merge them. So top left-hand corner of any like sub window, and then you click and drag across, and then you can merge, or you can just right-click, on the area and say join areas and then just merge it across. So all I'm looking for is my model at the top here.
Hold on, how do you do that again?
And you click and drag across and then you can merge, or you can just right click on the area and say join areas and then just merge it across. So all I'm looking for is my model at the top here, and then at the bottom here, this is our node editor. So you can see that this node here, this long list of settings, let's call it, this resembles what is over here, because in fact it is a one-to-one copy. So this material panel here is really just a way to, like, if you need simple changes, like, you know, you're just adding in an object, you know, and then, you know.
All right, let me go back and figure that out. What the fuck did he do?
Need them. So I'm actually going to click and drag across to merge.
Click and drag across. Okay, how the fuck did I bring it back? Ah, shite. Mess it up, didn't I? Just click and drag across. Alright, wait a minute, I remember how to do this. Shader editor, no, not that one. Boy, I think it's this one. No, not. What am I doing? Is this? Yeah. Using this for a long time. Damn, donut looks so good right now. Not gonna lie, I wanna bite into it, and I don't even like donuts. I don't even like donuts. It's too sugary.
Them. So top left hand corner of any like sub window, and then you click and drag across and then you can merge, or you can just right click on the area and say join areas and then just merge it across. So all I'm looking for is my model at the top here, and then at the bottom here, this is our node editor. So you can see that this node here, this long list of settings, let's call it, this resembles what is over here, because in fact it is a one-to-one copy. So this material panel here is really just a way to, like, if you need simple changes, like, you know, you're just adding in an object, you know, and then, I just want that object to be, you know, red or something. I can do it over here very quickly. But if I want to do texturing and combine things and do like interesting things with the material, that's when you want to switch to the shader. The node editor, which is where you can do, you can add extra nodes and extra things, and it gets really interesting, and you can do it all here. So the way that the node editor works, if you've never worked with nodes, is it works from left to right, okay? And it's very simple at the moment, because this thing, by the way, these boxes, these are called, nodes, okay? And they work left to right. So it's taking a single shader, this Principled BSDF, which, as I said, is based off of Disney Shader. It's fantastic. It's got everything you need most of the time. And then it's just outputting it into this, it's sending that data into the material output as the surface value, and that is what is being rendered. So if I was to add in another node and plug it in here, it would change how it looks. So as an example, if I went to add, and then I added in texture, let's just pick a texture. Let's go Voronoi texture. I've got another node here with some things, distance, color, position, and all things here. If I was to take this, plug this into my base color, you can see that now this is reflected. If I went to add, and then I added in texture, let's just pick a texture. Let's go Voronoi texture. I've got another node here with some things, distance, color, position, and all things here. If I was to take this, plug this into my base color, you can see that now this is reflecting. So it's lost the setting that was there before.
Hmm. So wait, I'm sorry. I just keep getting lost on some of these things. Like I'm trying to figure out.
Because in fact, it is a one-to-one copy. So
Yeah.
this material panel here is really just a way to, like, if you need simple changes, like, you know, you're just adding in an object, you know, and then, I just want that object to be, you know, red or something. I can do it over here very quickly. But if I want to do texturing and combine things and do like interesting things with the left to right, just outputting it into this, it's sending that data into the material, because this node editor, which is where you can do, you can add extra nodes and extra things, and it gets really interesting. And you can do it all here. So the way that the node editor works, if you've never worked with nodes, is it works from left to right. Okay, and it's very simple at the moment, because this thing, by the way, these boxes, these are called nodes. Okay, and they work left to right. So it's taking a single shader, this Principled BSDF, which, as I said, is based off of Disney's shader. It's fantastic. It's got everything you need most of the time. And then it's just outputting it into this, it's sending that data into the material output as the surface value, and that is what is being rendered. So if I was to add in another node and plug it in here, it would change how it looks. So as an example, if I went to add, and then I added in texture, let's just pick a texture. Let's go Voronoi texture. I've got another node here with some things, distance, color, position, and all things here. If I was to take this, plug this into my base color, you can see that now this is reflecting. So it's lost the setting that was there before, that canary yellow. It's lost that, and it's replaced it with the input of my Voronoi texture. You should see the difference between distance.
Wait a minute. I don't see that. Wait a minute. Wait, why is it still white? That's probably what it was. No. What am I missing?
And color. It's the setting that was there before, that canary yellow. It's lost that, and it's replaced it with the input of my Voronoi texture. You should see the difference between distance and color. Texturing, it's a Voronoi canary yellow. It's lost that, and it's replaced it with the input of my Voronoi texture. You should see the difference between distance and color. Texturing, it's a whole thing in and of itself. There's courses on procedural texturing. It's very interesting, and you can do a lot with it.
Hello. Do something. Wait, let me hide this. This is not doing anything. Oh boy. Oh. Oh, I had it on. Wow. Really? I was about to say. Let me take this out actually, real quick. Alright, let's go back to this man right here. That makes a lot of sense. I was like, what the fuck? Let's get some texture. Get this Veronica texture. Veronica texture.
The great thing about a workflow like this, like using a node to create textures, is that you can come back and change it later on. Like if I was to paint in the this browning, white, yellowing effect or whatever, this little speckledy view there, that is one way that you could texture a donut. You could do it that way. The problem is if I then later on realize like, the size of those speckledy bits, they're too big or they're too brown or something like that. If I'd painted that in, I couldn't change it easily later on. But I could if I had done it with shaders over here, with procedural, non-destructive workflows like this. I could come back and change it at any time. So anyways, you can see that going left into this to right and then spitting it out into the material output. That is how we are creating a shader. Okay, so let's delete that and let's now create the actual texture. Okay, so I'm going to add or Shift A, same hotkey as the 3D viewport, by the way. I'm going to add in the texture that you use like 10 times more than any of these others, to be honest, besides maybe image texture, is noise texture right here. So this noise texture, you can see that you've got two outputs, you've got color and you've got factor, and they are very similar. The factor value is basically just the grayscale version of the color. So the color is giving us a sort of a rainbow splatter across everything. And if I change the scale here, I can change the size of that that splattering effect. If I take the factor, put that into the base color, it's just the black and white version of that. Okay, so that's all.
All right, let me see. Okay, okay, okay.
It's all very well and cool, but how do I create the colors of my original donut light, like the colors that I had here originally? By the way, if you want to cut a node string, which you've got there, you could just click and like remove it like that. Or if you just want to cut and slice through the middle, it's Control right mouse drag, and that'll bring out the knife, and then it will just sever any connection basically. So if I want to change the colors of that, I could do this by
Control. Man, that shit's not working, bro.
adding in another.
Yeah. No, sir. Does not work, bro. Nope.
The node, bring out the knife, and then it will just middle. It's Control right mouse drag, and that
Control right mouse drag. My right mouse is doing something else. Okay. Okay. There we go. Tell me why my right mouse is doing this instead of this the whole time.
that'll bring out the knife, and then it will just sever any connection basically. So if I want to change the colors of that, I could do this by adding in another node between these two. And the node that I'm looking for is add, or Shift A, add, converter color range.
Okay. So, all right, let me take a second to check on something real quick. All right. Go.
I'm looking for is add, or Shift A, add, converter color ramp. Color ramp is a really handy node. You'll use it a lot. And if I drop that in between here, this is now taking the black and white values and is converting it into this range, essentially. And you can see that if I just change these sliders, it's basically acting like a contrast of that noise texture. But I could change the colors here to be, you know, anything I wanted. I could make a really weird, horrible looking donut very quickly. But if I change these to something a little more similar to the original donut color, something like that maybe, and then maybe make this like a little bit darker, a little bit more saturated. Let's bring that across or something like that. That looks a little closer to something that was right here. Something else that'll really help you, and I want to use it straight away, is actually it's the Node Wrangler add-on. Because what I want to do is I want to preview my noise texture here to show you something, but you can't really see it very well. And basically, go to your edit preferences, and then go to add-ons, and then just type in Node, and you should see is converting it into this range, essentially. And you can see that if I just change these sliders, it's basically acting like a contrast of that noise texture. But I could change the colors here to be, you know, anything I wanted. I could make a really weird, horrible looking donut very quickly. But if I change these to something a little more similar to the original donut color, something like that maybe. And then maybe make this like a little bit darker.
Okay. Okay. It makes a lot of sense. I see now. I see. I see what y'all doing. Okay. I'll just make this like.
A little bit more saturated. Let's bring that across or something like that. That looks a little closer to something that was right here. Something else that'll really help you, and I want to use it straight away, is actually it's the Node Wrangler add-on. Because what I want to do is I want to preview my noise texture here to show you something, but you can't really see it very well. And basically, go to your edit preferences, and then go to add-ons, and then just type in Node, and you should see one here called Node Wrangler. So just enable that, and then this will enable you to, if you hold down Control, Shift, and left click on any node, you are then previewing just that node. So just seeing the raw output of that and bypassing all this other stuff. I could also Control Shift on the color ramp and I could see just that. And then if I want to see everything, I just node, Shift, and left click on any node. This will enable you to, if you hold down Control, Shift, and left click on any node, you are then previewing just that node. So just seeing the raw output of that and bypassing all this other stuff. I could also Control Shift on the color ramp and I could see just that. And then if I want to see everything, I just Control Shift click on the final shader there. The Node Wrangler is like the one add-on that all Blender users use all the time because it's so handy. You can do a bunch of stuff with it, but yeah, this is one really convenient feature. Anyways, what I wanted to show you with this noise texture here is that it's actually, there's a bit of stretching. The size of these splotches here are different to how they look on the top. On the top, they look fine, but on the sides here, they look stretched. And that is a little bit technical, but the way that any texturing works in 3D software is it has to take a 2D texture. Think of like a Photoshop file. It's an image, and then it has to somehow map that onto a 3D model. In fact, this is actually very obvious when you add an image texture. So if I just add in an image texture, just to demonstrate this, let's use, why not? Let's use a thumbnail from the previous parts of this tutorial series. If I just paste this on here, bam, Nightmare Fuel. Let's turn off, let's go for it, there you go. You can see that it's stretched around the donut. It's tried to add it. Yeah, it's mapped parts of that 2D texture onto this 3D model. It has to do it somehow. And it just so happens that the one that it does for procedural textures, which is what this is, this noise texture, it's just wrong. I think it uses UV or generated or something. Instead, we want to change it to something else. So we can do that by adding another image, another node over here to the left. So Shift A, and then the one that you are looking for is Input Texture Coordinate. Texture Coordinate. So the default one is generated. So if you don't have anything connected into your vector input, which is, by the way, the vector input, vectors, how do you explain vectors? And the one that you are looking for is another node over here to the left. So Shift A, and then the one that you are looking for is Input Texture Coordinate. Texture Coordinate. So the default one is generated. So if you don't have anything connected into your vector input, which is, by the way, the vector input, vectors, how do you explain vectors? You don't. You just don't. In the beginning tutorial series, you don't need to know it. But really, the colors of these inputs, yellow goes to yellow, green goes to green, gray goes to gray. I mean, it doesn't actually, gray and yellow can be interchangeable. It doesn't really matter if gray goes into a yellow, but generally you want to use the same color going into the same color. So this blue one, you must make sure that at least you've always got a blue input going into it, but it should be a texture coordinate is the one you're looking for. So generated is the one that it will use by default if nothing is added into it. What we want to change it to is object. When you do that, you might think like, oh, it's broken, nothing's happened. It is there, it's just that the scale of this has changed. So I need to increase this to be much higher before I can see that back. And now you can see I don't have that stretching occurring across the donut. Basically, object, it will basically treat the 3D view rather, instead of like wrapping it around, it'll sort of like try to understand it like in a 3D depth, the depth of it, and like if this part of the mesh is like hitting this part of the cloud, it'll map it to there. And anyway, that's sort of the way I imagine it. It's just, yeah, it does the correct mapping essentially for our donut. So we'll change the scale of this. Okay, this is the joy of procedural workflows like this. You can change the size and shape and things of anything you want. You can also change the detail, which you can't really see much going on here, but if you go like detail 0, it's just like soft big shapes, but then you can increase it, and it's kind of like it's adding more and more smaller shape splotches in between it almost. But default is 2. Let's just leave it at that. All right. The other thing I want to do in this case is I want to create, and this is the joy of nodes, is that you can take the output of this and not just use it for the color input, which we've got here, but actually make it drive another part of the shader. And one part of the shader we want to make it drive is the bump map, okay? Because looking at our reference here, you can see it especially on the silhouette, but you can see it here, like the surface. If you were to run your fingernail across that donut, you would see it like it would raise. There's little bumps and micro grooves and everything happening across there. So we want to make this splotchy effect not just affect the color, but also affect the bump. And we can do that by adding another node. Because what we need to do is make it drive this normal input. And there is no way you could ever guess that normal is what would drive the bump information of a shader. And while it would be great to make it like user-friendly and say, just call this bump, it's not just used for bump. It's used for a whole bunch of things. It's basic. Normal is the the directions of the face on the model, essentially. So if you're doing something to the normals of a shader, you are changing the appearance of the way those faces look. It's all very technical. It's kind of mathematical. You don't really need to know it, other than to say that this is a blue input, input. So you couldn't take, and you could try, if you put the factor output of that noise texture into there, that would be wrong. Okay? It doesn't know what to do. It's now like it's converted our faces from smooth to just hard. It's completely wrecked it. I would actually love it if it just came up as red. Like, don't do that. This thing should just be red. We need to convert this first into information that the normal thing can read. So to do that, we want to hit Shift A, and then go vector, and the node I'm looking for is bump. Okay, if I dropped this in here, if I drop it over a highlighted connector, it will now automatically drop it in there in the middle and connect it. It's done it terribly though. It's tried to guess, but it's done a bad job. I don't want to drive the normal input. I want to put it into the height input. Height. Okay, now it is appearing the way it should. It's just way too strong. Now you might think that what you need to change is the strength. It's actually not correct. The strength should always be 1. It's kind of like on or off, like bump. The one that you're looking for is distance, which is how in the 3D space, like how big do you want these bumps to appear? So it doesn't have a nice slider or anything, but it's the one you need. And I believe, I could be totally wrong on this, but I have heard, I'm pretty sure it's correct, but this distance value is in Blender units, which is by default metric. So this is treating this bump as if it is 1 meter. Like you want the bumps to be 1 meter, which is ridiculous. So it's about 100 times what it should be. So I'm going to change this to 0.002. 0.002. And now that is much better. Now you can't really see. Can you see it? You can see it okay.
Oh, yeah.
You would see it a lot better, actually, if you turned up the detail. Now, this is the joy of bump mapping, of normal mapping, really, because that's what this is. This is fakery. All this detail here is detail that you get for free. You can see it's not changing the silhouette of our donut, okay, which is important. This is just, it's a fakery illusion to pretend as if this detail exists when it doesn't. So it's only appearing on the shader, so on the faces of the light and everything like that. It's not actually displacing it. If you wanted to do that, you would have to pay for it with so much higher like mesh density and everything. We did it actually for the previous tutorial. We'll not be using it for this because it was overkill. I went way too far on that. We're just going to keep it simple and make it look nicer as well. So I often joke, like the person who discovered normal mapping, or this technique for bump mapping, must have fallen out of their chair, like in 1990s or 80s or whatever. They must have been like, this is the key that will finally enable us to create the detail needed in film and everything without having to pay for it on our, ridiculously slow computers. Because it's really insane what it's doing for free. All video games use normal maps because it's fake detail and you don't have to pay for it with render times. So it is phenomenal. Anyways, so I don't want to use a detail of 3 because look, this is where it comes into like how detailed, how realistic do you want your donut to look? Because if you go really detailed, you kind of have to do it for everything or else this one part will look odd. I see it a lot because I got 2 kids now, 1 2, 1 4. One that is 2 years old, one that is 4. That was a weird sentence. And they just watch terrible kids shows because there's just so much terrible kids content out there. It's just like all kids shows, they just don't care about like detail consistency. They'll have like a high-res grass model and then just like this simplified house. And it's like, why? Like, can you not tell that like super detailed Megascans grass model doesn't go with that like Duplo house? I don't know. It's just one of my pet peeves. But what I'm saying is like if you go really detailed on this, you will have to do it for your icing, your everything. So we actually want to go simplified. Keep it sort of a stylized sort of look. I reckon around like something around about 3. That might look good. And then, change the size of your scale or whatnot if you want to change that. But something like that. Like it's still clearly like not very, like the color hasn't changed much. And we're going to, in the next part, actually do some texture painting. But you can see that it's got more visual interest there than was before. I might actually turn that down to like an even subtler amount, maybe somewhere in the middle. You can change it at any point in the process. That is the joy of 3D rendering. Okay, cool. So in the next part, we are going to be doing the painting aspect, where we're going to create that white part that goes around the middle there. And then we're going to be combining it with the rest of our shader here and learning some more good stuff. So click here to join me in the next part.
Damn. Hold on, I gotta save this. All right.
See you there. So our existing node setup is a purely procedural workflow. This is all using computer mathematics and everything to create the result, which is all great, and it enables us to adjust things later on. It's great. But for the next thing that we want to add is this white bit around our donut, where it's been sitting in the fat, but it's like getting less hot fat on the surface maybe, so it's cooking it less. So it's a white part of it. And there's a number of ways, you know, there's always 100 ways to skin a cat in Blender. You can do it many different ways. You can make a gradient thing, do it all procedurally as well. But I find the fastest way, and actually probably the most, for something like this, like it's kind of like creative and you want to add some variation thing in there, you want to use texture painting. So Blender has that feature, texture paint, the little workspace at the top there. Click that, and this will take you to the texture paint window. Now, if you were to switch here, you can see that our donuts become purple, and that's because it needs an image texture to paint into, and one does not exist yet. You could create one over here, but really what you need to do first, and because we've already got a node set up already created over here, the best way to do it to make sure that you do it correctly and you haven't lost something is to add an image texture and then paint into that. When, like, basically add an image texture first and then switch to texture paint. So right up here, I'm going to hit Shift A, then go Input. Is it Input? Sorry. Texture. Texture. Image Texture. I know what I'm doing. Don't worry. Image Texture is the one you're looking for. And then I'm going to take that and I'm going to plug that into the base color. So I'm going to override this. In fact, I don't need the color ramp anymore. I'm just going to keep the noise texture that's going into the bump at the moment. So now that I've got this image texture, there's no image texture added.
Hold on. What the fuck?
And no, I'm actually surprised it's black now. It used to be purple. Anytime Blender can't find an image texture, it would come up as purple, but evidently it's black for some reason. Anyways, you could, if you were to hit these two buttons here, Open will open a texture from your hard drive, as we demonstrated in the last part. You could do that. But if you want to paint into something or paint something from scratch, you want to hit New. And by the way, this one on the left-hand side here, this will show you any textures that's currently loaded into Blender. I could bring that up as well. So this is the previous reference photo that I loaded into Blender. So it's like temporarily storing it in the background so that I could recall it later on if I wanted. What I want to click on is New, because I want to create a new image texture. So I go to hit New, and then when you hit New, you get this like temporary little window pop-up thing. This is where we can change some values of things. The most important thing is the height and width. So this is the resolution of the image texture we're going to paint into. So obviously, the higher res you go, then the more detail you could paint in, right? So this is, I mean, you really shouldn't care about this as you're a beginner, because you won't know, like, depending on what model you're making, like how high res you need to go. But generally, like, you need to think, like, how close is the camera going to be to my object, and how, like, am I rendering in 4K? Is the camera going really close? Yes, you're going to need to maybe render in like 2 or 4K or something as a texture to paint into, right? But if it's something like this, Like honestly, you don't even need this big of an image. That's over. And the reason you don't want to go too big of an image is that the higher you go, the
Processing
longer
power.
your render is going to take.
Yeah.
Because Blender will have to load that texture into the like the memory basically to render with it. It's also going to be slower to work with whilst you're creating shaders and everything else. So you want to try to keep things light. And for something like this, we really don't need much at all. We don't even need the default, which is usually pretty low. I'm going to halve this. So, which by the way, I'm just clicking and dragging down so that I can change both of the values at the same time. And I want to halve it. And the easiest way to halve it is to do the math in the field, which is a cool thing that Blender lets you do. So if I add in /, that's divide by, and then number 2, and then I hit enter, it's now halved it basically. So it's now 512. And by the way, why don't you just like type in like 500? Like why 512? 512 seems like an odd number. It's one of those like, you know, computer technical things. It's like keeping it to the power of 2, I believe. It just makes it easier for it to process and store the information or like render it in the correct space. I don't know. Honestly, I haven't looked into it too much. I've been using Blender for 15 years, but it's best to try to keep it with it. You know, it's like the memory of the computer. It's like 128, 256, 512, 124, etc. You kind of go in that. I don't know, maybe the nerds just insult you. The mathematical or the computer people, maybe you can reply in the comments what it actually is for. But anyways, just divide it by 2. I'm going to go 512. Now the base color, you could change it later on when we actually start painting, but just to make it easier, I'll just do it now. I'll set a sort of a base color of a donut. So something around about a value of a 0.8, saturation of around about a 0.6, something like that. I'll go with that. And then the name, which I could also change later, but I'll name it now. Donut base. I don't need alpha, and then I'm going to hit OK. Haha. So if this is that 6, something like that, I'll go with that. And then the name, which I could also change later, but I'll name it now. Donut base. I don't need alpha, and then I'm going to hit OK. Haha. So if this is that color is the same as this color, then it would just be doing like.
Hold on. Did he take out the alpha?
I don't need alpha.
How do I change that now? You know what? I'm just gonna make it again. All right. I wanna get it right exactly. Texture.
Alpha, and then I'm going to hit OK. Haha. So if this is that color is the same as this color, then it would just be doing like nothing would. Would have changed right now because this is a solid image texture which we can't see, right? But which we can't, like I can't show you the image like on this view. But if we click on texture paint mode, you should see that it's shown up right here. When you click to texture paint mode, it should show you by default. This is the properties here, but if you click on active tool there. Active tool, which it's always just visible, I believe, and it's always the active tool. And because we We are in texture paint mode here. We can't I can't show you the image like on this view, but if we click on texture paint mode, you should see that it's shown up right here. When you click to texture paint mode, it should show you by default. This is the properties here, but if you click on active tool there, active tool, which it's always just visible, I believe, and it's always the active tool. And because we are in texture paint mode on our object, it's now showing us the texture paint. So it's saying where are you painting into, and it's painting into our donut base texture. And over here on the left-hand side, you should see the solid color, which is the new image which we've created. If you can't see it, just select it over here and it should show up. Okay, now if I was to change this color to be something and just paint, you can see I'm painting onto my model. And you should also see it showing up on your image texture over there. Okay, now where is it, because the other thing you can do is you can change it's normally automatically set to this, but in my case it's not. I want to change to paint mode, and then I could actually paint directly over here as well. So this is again sort of talking about the image coordinates. So take a texture and a 2D flat texture and map it onto a 3D model. It has to wrap it in some way according to texture coordinates. So this coordinates that we're using right now is the UV map. So if I was to actually go into edit mode, let's go to edit mode right here. You can see these are my image, whatever, my mesh, right? And it's created this grid here. So each of these single grids, in fact, if I was to switch, don't do this, I'm just doing it so I can show you, and then go to sync mode, right? If I was to select different parts of this mesh, you can see which parts it actually correlates with on the image texture. There's actually a great image on Twitter. I'll paste it up here so you can see it, but it's it was like the best way to explain UV coordinates to like a toddler even is like a Christmas ornament, like a chocolate of a Christmas like little Santa thing. It's the exact same thing. It's taking a 2D thing and then it is wrapping it around the model. So that is what it's doing. So we're painting onto a 2D texture, which is then being mapped onto it. So you could paint over here, or you could paint onto your model. It's generally much easier to paint onto the model, and that's what we're going to do. So I will. What view am I in? Yeah, let's go. Okay, image editor, paint mode, and then texture paint mode. Okay, and then this is turned on again. I gotta turn that off. Okay, display. I don't want the image texture. Okay, all right, and then I want to change the fill thing. For some reason, it sets it as white. I don't know. And then I'll just click, single click, and now I've got my my donut base there. Solid color base, I mean. All right. Now, if I was to set this to a white color, and let's go, 0.8, 0.8 will be fine. And then I'll set it to kind of like a low strength. And I've got a Cintiq sitting right next to me, but I will not use it because instead I'm going to click like this, just like you guys are with your little mouse. But obviously, if you've got a stylus, then it's much better because you've got pen pressure. You don't have to do as many clicks. Click, 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 click. But yeah, I'm painting around the middle part, and you can see that it's reflected over there. I could also paint across here. I could set my brush strength. And the brush strength, same hotkey as we did with sculpting, it's F to change your size, not strength. Size is F, and then strength is Shift F, which is the exact same hotkeys as sculpting, which is nice. It's a nice thing that Blender does. It tries to use the, whoa, you see that little thing that just popped up there? That was like one of my scripts, my add-ons that I've got enabled, just had a fit right then for some reason. I don't know why. But that's third-party add-ons. You know, you get what you get. Sometimes it'll just have a hizzy fit. But anyways, yeah, one of the good things about Blender is like the hotkeys are generally consistent. Like G for grab and S and scale and rotate. You can even do that. You can do that everywhere. Like for nodes, like, yeah, I didn't even show you, but like, yeah, you could like take these and like scale them with S and rotate them. It's like, why would you need to rotate? But like you can, like all of the hotkeys are the same everywhere in Blender. It's really nice actually that they've done that. Unlike Adobe, looking at you, try and go from like Adobe to Illustrator, and it's like, what? Like the pen tools are different, and like everything's got a different. It just drove me crazy. Anyways, by the way, if you hit X, that is a hotkey from Photoshop. I know I just bad-mouthed Adobe, but there's a hotkey from Adobe of Photoshop. It's the same here. We'll just swap between two like a foreground and background color. So I want to keep white, but then I want to make this one my donut color. So I'm going to click this, click the eyedropper, click that, and now I could like quickly swap. Like if this part looks too white to me, I can do some brownish painting, and then if this part I want to make it white, I can just hit X and do that. So the reason I'm doing this like sort of staggered thing is this is kind of how it looks. I mean, that looks like solid white. I think that was like a homemade recipe, but this one I've just looked in other photos and it seems to be not a constant color that goes all around it. It's sort of like splotchy. There'll be parts that'll have more and X and do that. So the reason I'm doing this like sort of staggered thing is this part looks too white to me. I want to keep white of Photoshop's the same here. We'll just swap between two. There's a hotkey from Adobe of Photoshop's the same here. We'll just swap between two like a foreground and background color. So I want to keep white, but then I want to make this one my donut color. So I'm going to click this, click the eyedropper, click that, and now I could like quickly swap. Like if this part looks too white to me, I can do some, go from like Adobe to Illustrator, and it's like, what? Like the pen tools are different, and like everything's got a different, it just drove me crazy. Anyways, by the way, if you hit X, that is a hotkey from Photoshop. I know I just bad-mouthed Adobe, but there's a hotkey from Adobe of Photoshop's the same here. We'll just swap between two like a foreground and background color. So I want to keep white, but then I want to make this one my donut color. So I'm going to click this, click the eyedropper, click that, and now I could like quickly swap. Like if this part looks too white to me, I can do some brownish painting, and then if this part I want to make it white, I can just hit X and do that. So the reason I'm doing this like sort of staggered thing is this is kind of how it looks. I mean, that looks like solid white. I think that was like a homemade recipe, but this one I've just looked in other photos and it seems to be not a constant color that goes all around it. It's sort of like splotchy. There'll be parts that'll have more and parts that'll have less. Not sure if you can hear, but yeah, there's a crow that's just going ape outside. I like rented my office, my little studio here, and it's just a residential block, and I'm like, I have to make sure there's no like barking dog next door because that'll just like ruin tutorials. And then I'm like, all right, dogs are cool. All right, everybody seems cool. Okay, I'm gonna do it. And then I like move in. Didn't realize that like at odd times throughout the day, it's just the trees around here. You just have birds fighting constantly and just barking at each other. So I just have to deal with it. Or more like you have to deal with it. But I don't even know if you can hear it. It's hard to understand what the microphone will pick up. All right, so that's pretty good. All right, not bad. Cool. We got a thing. All right. Now, one thing to note is when you do texture painting on a texture that you have created in Blender, or you've altered or modified in Blender, you can see that on this image thing up here, you've got a little star. And that star means that this image is not actually saved yet. It's actually, it's only visible in, on this image thing up here, you've got a little star. And that star means that this image is not actually saved yet. It's actually, it's only visible in your current blend session, right, temporarily. If you were to actually quit right now, which I'll just do something dangerous and say quit, it'll say, do you want to save your changes, first of all, for your blend file, but also, do you want to save your modified images? That's a new feature of Blender, by the way. Never used to have that. So it used to be all the time people would paint something in Blender, and then they would go, wow, that's loud. They would say, what happened to my texture? Like, why is it not in the thing? It's like, yeah, you didn't save it. So you want to save your texture. So you want to go save or save as, and it will then say, where do you actually want to, where do you want to save it? Okay, so let's save it right here. I'll call this, yeah, donut base. Let's do that. And now that little star there has gone. So that means now that if I was to exit, it doesn't matter because this thing has happened. If I was to do another little paint session here, the star has appeared again because it hasn't saved it. So the hotkey to save just the image texture, it's Alt-S. Do that, and it's now saved over the image. All right, so back at my shader over here. I like the way this looks, but I want to also use parts of my noise texture, which is what I had before, because I want to have that, this look, right? Where I've got that kind of browny, white, yellowy parts where it's all kind of like splotchy across it, like it's been sitting in a fryer, kind of uneven. I feel like the more like commercial, because I've looked at so many donut references, the more commercial the donut operation, the more uniform and plain your donuts will appear. But if you're like doing homemade donuts or like artisanal donuts, I'm sure that's a thing now, you'll get like more interesting shapes and things. So anyways, take that as you will. All right, so what I want to do is I want to take the output of my noise texture and somehow infuse it with my base colors here. And the way that you do that is, in this case, because it is not a, if you were combining two shaders, which is a whole, shaders, whatever, you would do it with a mix shader, and you would get two inputs, which is a green. So you would take the green into the green, blah, blah, blah. What we want to do is combine two yellow, like the color of this tells you what sort of information it's being transported across. I want to take this grayscale and this yellow, which is basically just color information, and I want to combine them. So what I need is another node called a add color mix RGB. So if I take this mix RGB, drop this in right here, and then take the output of my factor input and drop this into the bottom input right here. What this will do now is if I set this factor amount here is showing which one do you want to show. If it's all the way to the left, it's showing just the top input. If it's all the way to the right, it's showing just the bottom input. Okay, and it's a simple like opacity slider. It's like if it's in Photoshop and there's a layer above it and you're changing the opacity. That's all it is doing. This mix box type, whatever, that is just like Photoshop. It is a blend type. It's a blending mode, which is in invert order for some reason. There we go. Now it's the correct order. And that will take, basically it'll do the exact same thing that it would in Photoshop. So this is an overlay. If I want to take just the dark parts of my bottom input, then multiply is the one that I want. So that way it'll ignore all of the white areas. Shader compilation, the downfall of Eevee. It'll ignore all the white areas and just use the dark values. So now that this bottom input just becomes the dark thing. The one that I actually want though is overlay. Overlay, similar to multiply, but it will also, as well as darkening areas, it will also add it. So if you look at just the add one, then it will do the opposite of the multiply. It will not darken, but it'll ignore the dark areas and only use the white areas. So overlay does both, kind of. It'll brighten it if it appears brighter than the texture underneath it, and it will darken it if it is darker than the texture underneath it. So the factor input there is like the strength of it, really. The strength of how much of this bottom input do you want to add as an overlay thing on top, basically. So all the way to 1 is way too high. I don't want to go that far, but I want to add some input to it. And in fact, I might change my scale of this to be a little bigger. That looks pretty nice, actually. And my recording just crashed because I ran out of disk space. I should have listened to that notification that popped up. But anyways, it's a matter of just tinkering until you're happy with the result. It's the joy of 3D. You can just pull up your reference and, side by side and go, do I want something like that? Or do I want something like this? And what can I do to try to improve it? But this is a, pretty basic setup, but you can sort of get a feel now for how nodes work, right? We've got an image texture that's being added with a procedural one combined into a base color. And then that same procedural one is also driving bump, and reading left to right. We can see how our shader is made up of. All these values that don't have anything plugged into them are obviously just values. If I wanted to, I could also make like this roughness. I could take the output of my noise texture and make it apply to my roughness as well. So I would have what looks like, well, we'll see once the shaders compilation finishes. Not much actually, but there should be some parts that look kind of like smudges. That's kind of a way to make a smudge map. Basically, you'll have parts that will look more diffuse, like more matte, and then other parts that'll look glossy, and you could like exaggerate it with a color ramp. I'm sort of getting ahead of myself here and just mucking around, but you can see how valuable nodes are and why before nodes, it was tough times back in my day of Blender. There you go. You got what looks like puddles all over your donut now, just by making this noise texture go into the roughness thing. You can do a lot with it. But that's it. That'll do it for this part. So go ahead, click on the screen here to join me in the next part of our donut series. So we want to add some
Mm.
Tastes good like soul food. Parked up outside in the old school. The new me back with the OU. The dog always find his way back home, and it's so true. Later on, fall through and pop one. You know the motto, smoke something, drink something, pop one. Got your hand on my Glock while your ass ride shotgun. High stakes, risk it every day. I know fucking ugly niggas just not fun. Had to zero out the fade cause I'm not one. Yeah. So smoke something, drink something, pop one. 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 Yeah. Smoke something, drink something, pop one.
some sprinkles to our donut, and obviously manually placing them by hand would be absolutely mad. And the previous method, which would be to use particles, which is what I taught from my old donut tutorial series, that's glitchy, it's outdated, and thank goodness we don't have to touch it, because there is a new and better, amazing geometry nodes, which in the name kind of tells you a little bit about what it does. Similar to what we just covered, nodes, similar to material nodes, geometry nodes let you combine things, take this value, put it into that value, and then create new things, but for geometry, as in the actual mesh, the objects that are going on in your scene. It's really, really powerful. It's almost hard to overstate just how powerful it is. Because, for example, you could make a building, easy stuff that it enables for animation and motion graphics, and that's just getting started. Like, this feature was only introduced very recently, and it's already enabling so much. By the way, speaking of which, brief pause for all of my fellow Blender users who learned geometry nodes when it was first introduced about 8 months ago for 2.92. Most of that's kind of redundant now because they have updated geometry nodes to a new fields-based system, and it's much easier to use. Don't get me wrong, it was the right decision, but it's surprising that it happened so soon after they just first introduced it. So I did a tutorial on it, and now that tutorial is kind of outdated. Shame for me. But anyways, I'm going to show you the new method. It is easier for everyone to use, and it's good that they did it. But anyways, let's get to it. So you want to obviously select the object you want to have the sprinkles scattered on, which is our icing. And to access geometry nodes, you could do it
Be right back.
Tastes good like soul food. Parked up outside in the old school. The new me back with the OU. The dog always find his way back home, and it's so true. Later on, fall through and pop one. You know the motto, smoke something, drink something, pop one. Got your hand on my Glock while your ass ride shotgun. High stakes, risk it every day. I know fucking ugly niggas just not fun. Had to zero out the fade cause I'm not one. So smoke something, drink something, pop one. 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 Yeah. Smoke some, drink some, pop one. 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 On the front steps, all getting ran through. Yeah, back, ball with it. Yeah, I'm in a crank call with it. Yeah, I made phone calls with it. Yeah, I made prank calls with it. Yeah, in H-Town lately, where you find me? Yeah. Ride city, no ID. Yeah. Back of the Benz where I found peace. Yeah. Peace popular. And need notchiness. From blue up in them. Smoke some, drink some, pop one. 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 Smoke some, drink some, pop one.
A couple of ways. One would be to split your view and then change this new view to the geometry node editor. But I instead prefer to create a workspace for it. So if you click the, because there's not one here by default, if you click the little plus icon, then go general, there is one that you can enable called geometry nodes. So click that, and now we've got this extra one at the top there for geometry nodes. I'm going to move this over. Oh, you can't actually move it over. How about that? I just assumed that you could. I don't think I've ever tried to do that in Blender. All right, well, it's over on the right-hand side. I know where it is. And you can see it's split and arranged our windows. I don't want this one at the top here. This is like a spreadsheet for your vertices and stuff going on in the scene. Bit too advanced, more advanced than what we need it for. So I'm just going to merge it across, which again you do by going to the top left-hand corner, click and drag across until it merges. Okay, so there's this big part at the bottom here. This is our geometry nodes editor. You want to click on new. So when you do this, you will notice that yes, we've now got a node editor here to play with, but also in the right-hand side on the modifier stack, you can see that we've got this new modifier here for geometry nodes. So in order to use geometry nodes, it has to be a modifier. And you will only see what is displayed here in your geometry nodes on the selected modifier. So you can see there's a faint outline around this modifier. If I was to click off this and click on the subdivision right there, this has disappeared. Okay, so that's, if you've ever lost the geometry nodes, you're like, what happened? It used to be, just click the modifier. If you click the little pin button, that will ensure that it will always be there. So if you click off it, it doesn't matter. So if you've only got one system, I usually just click the little pin icon and it just makes it easier. Anyways, so similar to our shader, right? It works left to right. But what is interesting in this case is that we've got an input. Okay, we've got the geometry, and then that is being fed over to the right-hand side to the geometry output. Okay. The reason for that is that we've got mesh to start with. We've got all of this mesh info. So it's saying take this geometry data and then put that out over here, and then that is going to be the resulting mesh. So whatever we put in this middle section here is going to result in the output mesh. As a very, very basic example, I'm just going to type in, I can't actually remember. There's so many nodes, it's hard to remember where they are, but I'll just say set position. So I'll put this in here, and then let's offset this by 5 centimeters. Okay, so I have taken my icing, which is still there. The mesh, the original mesh data is what it started with, and then it changed its position, moved it up 5 centimeters, and now it's output it there. Okay, so I mean, I could animate this value. I could make this value be driven by something else. You can see how the possibilities. Maybe it's pretty cool. Right. So that's the example. So we want to scatter something over our mesh. And if you hit Shift A or just go to add, you'll see a whole string of different things here. And look, learning them one by one, I think that's the wrong way to learn things, in my opinion. I think it's best to follow tutorials, see what it is you're trying to do, and then just pick up the nodes as you go. And you'll eventually have learned so much that it's like you've learned them one by one, but you'll have actually got some context for where it's actually used. So the one that you're looking for in this case is underneath point, distribute points on faces. Okay, so if I select that and I drop this in right here, you, depending on what you've got, because you might actually see like a big point, a big dot appearing. But if you don't, in this case, we've got 0. It is actually creating points on our icing, but the density is so low for the scale of our donut that we're not seeing it. If I increased my density, I would see we've got points. Now, the reason these points are so ginormous is that we're working on a 10 centimeter scale for our donut, and so it's created really, really large points. I would hope at some point in the future, Blender has a display option for how big those points are, but for now it does not. You could change it with an extra node, but look, we don't need to because we're gonna add an object later on. But all this is to say is that it is actually there. Now, one thing you will notice is that our icing has actually disappeared. Okay, if you go into edit mode, it's still there, but in object mode, it is not. And that's because we said geometry input, convert it into points, and then that is going to be the geometry. We don't want that. We want our points and our geometry. So what you need to do is add in a geometry, join geometry node, and you'll use that one all the time. We're going to take that, put that in there, and then take our output from our original mesh and then put that in there. So now we've got points as well as our original icing underneath it. Okay, so these points, as you can see, they're just blobs, and this is just a viewport representation of what it is. It's just like it's data that Blender is seeing. It's little tiny things that do not exist. If you were to render it, you would not actually see anything. You just see your original donut because it's not using these points anywhere. So what we need to do is we need to, well, first of all, we need to have an object for this to replace our points. So let's set our density to 0 just so that we can actually not see those ginormous points blocking our view. And we want to model the object that we want to be placed on our icing there, which is a sprinkle. And there's various types of sprinkles. We're going to go for the most common one, which is based off a what shape? A cylinder. So Shift A, I'm going to add in, this is a new object, so it's not in edit mode or anything like that. New object, cylinder. Now when you do that, again, scale of Blender, thinks we're working at like 10 meters scale or something. We can just turn that all the way down to its like absolute smallest size, to like down here, and it's like almost the right size, but yeah. And then the vertice count, because this is going to be scattered all over our donut. You can see the number of like faces on there. It's quite a lot. That's a very detailed singular sprinkle. We don't need that much. So I'm going to set that to instead 8. All right. So now I've got that. Let's just move this to the side here. Move this up. And I'm just going to increase the scale of the x-axis, the z-axis, so S, Z, just so that I can just roughly get about the size of the sprinkle, and also just to scale.
Okay, what was the dimension for the sprinkle again?
Right. So now I've got that. So I'm going to set that to instead 8. Singular sprinkle.
Delete that. Yo, why is this a struggle? Alright, let's see. Look how many
we don't need that much, so I'm going to set that.
Right? Yeah. Okay. What else do I need? I just need to move, like, reduce the scale. So I know because it's too much. It's way too much.
Got your hand on my Glock while your ass ride shotgun. High stakes, risk it every day. I know fucking ugly niggas just not fun. Had to zero out the fade cause I'm not one. So smoke some, drink some, pop one. 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 Yeah. Smoke some, drink some, pop one. Smoke some, drink some, pop one. Smoke some, drink
I think that's good enough. Yeah.
That to instead 8. All right, so now I've got that. Let's just move this to the side here. Move this up, and I'm just going to increase the scale of the x-axis, sorry, the z-axis, so S, Z, just so that I can just roughly get about the size of the sprinkle, and also just to scale it just S without any axes, just so that I can make it a little bit bigger, and that looks pretty good to me. Okay, so now with my icing here selected, I am going to, between here and here, where it joins in, we're going to create our, we're going to start referencing this new cylinder as our sprinkle. So you'd think it would be under points, but it's actually under instances. So instances, this is a word, yeah, it's just under instances. We'll talk about it later. Under instances. And there's two here that I always get them confused. Instances on points or instances to points. And the one we're looking for is instance on points. And I always get them confused. It's, I don't know. I think they got to come up with a different name to like delineate properly. Yeah, it's. I always click the wrong one. But we're creating points, and so therefore we want to put an instance, which is going to be an object that is like referenced fast, like it can like stream it essentially without loading in the data 1,000 times. That's what an instance is. Yeah, so we're putting that instance on our points. Okay, so we've got this node here. And now this instance, whatever we put in this instance is going to be our points, essentially. So if we were to actually select our cylinder up here in our outliner, and if we were to just drag this over to our geometry nodes thing, look what it does. It creates an object info node with our cylinder selected. Another way to access that would be underneath input object info right there if you happen to lose it. But that's a really short and easy way to just click, drag it across, and now I've got it selected there. And if I take the geometry from that and then put that into the instance of that, we won't see anything because our density is set to nothing, basically. Now you can see something's happening. We've got cylinders, little tiny cylinders appearing on our icing. Now, these cylinders are looking really short and stubby. What's going on? This comes back to that problem that if you watched the whole series from the start, you'll know that when you scale and do things, and when I was scaling this, what it did was it changed the scale of this object here. And that's kind of, it's not been applied to the object data yet, essentially. So what you need to do first is hit Control A and then apply scale. And now it's actually referencing the object correctly. Okay. So far so good. It is rotating it though the wrong way because it's rotating it, upwards because.
Oh my god, blend is like a lot. Oh, what the hell are you guys? And how high do I have to go? Damn. No. Got your hand on my Glock while your ass ride shotgun. High stakes, risk it every day. I know fucking ugly niggas just not fun. Had to zero out the fade cause I'm not one. So smoke something, drink something, pop one. 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 Yeah. Smoke something, drink something, pop one. 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 So that's how this cylinder looks. So I'm going to rotate this on the x-axis. So RX, and then you can see in the top left-hand corner, that'll actually give you the rotation amount. And I want to go for exactly minus 90 degrees.
And you could actually type it in by hitting -90, and then you'll get that. Or another way is to just hold down Control, and then it will snap it to the nearest 5-degree increments. So that's a way that you can rotate something to an exact axis, or an exact amount, basically. So now I've done that, nothing has changed, because again, we've now changed the rotation here, but it hasn't really applied to the object. So I need to apply it, Control A, rotation. Haha. Okay, so now something's happening. I'm going to increase the density here so that we can see more of our sprinkles, okay? Things are getting better, but you can see now we've got another problem where it's like it looks okay at the top, but down here it's now jutting into it like that. So that's because what we needed to do is to follow the rotation of these faces down here, not use this blanket value across the whole thing, but follow the rotation of the faces. So and this is where, you know, a lot of people find geometry nodes is very complicated and complex, and it is. It does kind of change your workflow from being like a canvas tool, like an artist, to kind of thinking more mathematically. But what we've got here is distributing points. So we're creating points, and each of those points could have a rotation based on the face, right? So each of these individual points before them, with their little like blotchy shapes, they have a rotation applied to them. So if we took that rotation from the face and put that into here, which is our instances, now it's actually matching the rotation of the face. So it's kind of wrapping around it, which is really cool. It's what we want. So let's increase our density here. And you have to use really high values here because we're working at such a small scale. So this density value, if you were making a, let's say like a grass or something across here, right? Like working at like 2 meters, right? Let's say, or like a human scale, right? You would need to use far, far less, you know, maybe 50, if you want like 50 scattered rocks across here. It's essentially, what is it? It's density per meter. And because we're working at like 10 centimeters, a tenth of that, is like we have to really crank this up to get, you know, if we want 90 sprinkles on our donut or something, I guess we have to go 9,000, something like that. Anyways, we just have to use really, really large amounts. All right, now, once you start adding, once you get to, yeah, let's go 50,000. I'll show you how to make this easy. I'm just doing it progressively so you can understand things. But yeah, let's go 50,000. You can see that, okay, it's cool, but like, okay, now our rotation looks silly because it's following it like it's made of straw. It's like all combed into it. Whereas really we want each of these points to individually rotate, still apply to the face so they're not like jutting out crazy, but rotate around it. So between here and here, this rotation value we need to tweak. So again, you're not to know, or you'd never guess what node to use. It's one of those things you can only learn from tutorials. But the node that we're looking for, Shift A, is underneath Utilities, and we're looking for Rotate Euler. Is that how you pronounce that word? Euler?
Euler. That is right.
Euler.
Oh, my fault.
Euler.
Come on, no way.
Euler.
Wow.
Euler.
Euler.
Rotate
Euler?
No, that's wrong.
Leonard Euler.
Alright.
All right, that is wow. That's why.
It is well.
Right, he's Swiss. Basil Swiss. All right, cool, man. Euler is how we're supposed to pronounce your name, but you're dead, so Euler is. I'm going with Euler. It makes more sense to me. It's got an E and a U and an L and an ER. Euler. No, Euler. Euler. All right. So we drop this in here, making sure it's in the rotation. And now we can tweak it. So if we hit rotate by, and we just like, you know, rotate on one of these values here, you can see that we're rotating it on that specific axis. And look, we're getting some weird looking effects. Okay. The axis that we want to use is the Z axis because we're looking top down. So hit the little Z thing up there. We want to rotate along this axis. Okay. So if we just increase this, you would see that we're rotating it, but it's not actually on the right axis. Like something weird's going on. And that's because the by default base orientation is object, which I guess is the orientation of this object, but we want it to be local. And now it is local, I believe, to this sprinkle. That's my understanding of it. Whatever, could be wrong, but that's fine. Cool, so that's good. Now, you can see that we're rotating it, but they're all getting the exact same value. So we want to add basically randomness to this single value there. And the node for that, let me just move this up here so it's a little cleaner and easier to understand, is just type in search, and it is random value. This is one you will use all the time because it is very, very common when you're making something, you want to have random values for each new iteration or point or whatever. So this will generate a random value, and there's a number of ways to do it. The default is float, which means just basically a single number, and it'll give you something between 0 and 1, okay? Now, if I was to take this and put this into here, you can see that it is working. It's rotating each of those points on its own individual axes. But yeah, it's on all axes. So all the axes are getting a random value between 0 and 30. And it's not what we want. It's a little bit mashed up. So what we want to do is change it from float to vector. So vector, and this is where some people go like, oh, geometry nodes, it's too complex. I get it. Like vector, right? What is a vector? It's basically, it's 3 axes, okay?
Direction 3. Yeah.
Your X, your Y, and your Z. Your X, your Y, and your Z. So it's just like this, 0 to 30, but we've got it for each individual axis, which is exactly what we want.
Yeah.
So if we were to put this into here, rotate by, now it's generating on 0 to 1, but we can say not the X and not the Y axis, just the Z axis. All right, so it's working. Each point is getting their own individual rotation. It's adhering to the direction of the icing, but it's not fully rotated, right? Something's going on. That's because of this value here.
Okay. We need to increase this, and you'd think like 360, right? Because 360 degrees. And I was actually confused by this because it looks like, yeah, like it's already rotating like way more than, 360 degrees. This is actually a radian, like this is degree because it's got the little degree thing there. This is a radian value, which is, I guess like a single, it's like, actually, I spoke to Erindale, who is a guy who really knows his geometry nodes, paid for some of his time to just ask him a load of questions. But basically, a radian, it's like pi, In fact, if you type in pi, P-I, you'll get the value, 3.142. That'll give you 180 degrees because it's like half the circle. This is where I like blanked out in math in class. I just like, all right, what do I need to do to like pass the test? but he evidently knows what he's talking about. It's double pi because it needs to be more than 100 needs to be 360. So it's double pi, I discovered, is tau, T-A-U. If you type that in, it's double pi. And that's all the value you need. Like, so basically, I mean, you don't have to remember like to type in tau for the thing. It just, anything more than 6 will give you the correct thing because it just has to be more than 360. So that was all to explain that yeah, basically why. Oh gosh, how many times am I gonna try? Yeah, that's all you need to know. Okay, so we got a random value. Good, it's working. Things are working. Great, cool. All right, the next thing to solve is how do we stop the sprinkles from appearing in places where they should not, right? We don't want it on these globbity bits, and we also don't want it underneath the icing, which is what's happening. It's putting it on both axes. So what we need to do is do something called a weight paint. Okay, so if we select our icing and then hit Control Tab, that brings up a pie menu here for the different modes. So we've already used edit mode, we've already used sculpt mode before, but there's one here, weight paint. Oh, I actually did it because I was practicing for this tutorial. I've already done it. When you do weight paint, it will automatically add in a vertex group to it. So a vertex group it's basically like a value
between 0 and 1 for each individual point on your mesh, and you basically paint it in. Now it's covered in sprinkles right now, so I'm going to go to my modify stack, and as we learned before, this little button here will disable a modifier from your viewport only, and this one would disable it from your render, but yeah, just viewport, turn it off. Okay, so if I was to now just paint on here, whoops, by default, and as we learned before, this little button here will disable a modifier from your viewport only, and this one would disable it from your render, but yeah, just viewport, turn it off. Okay, so if I was to now just paint on here, whoops, by default it would be this. Hey, why are you back again? It's painting what looks like a heat map, okay? So the way this works in weight paint, dark blue is a value of 0, red is a value of 1, and then these other values are obviously leading up from there, like light blue, then green, then yellow, and then red to be all the way to 1, okay? So we want to paint, essentially, where do we want our sprinkles to go? Okay, so I'm going to change the size. I'll change my weight paint, so that's Control F. Same hotkeys as before for texture paint and sculpting. F to change the size of your brush, and then Control F to change the weight in this case. All right, so I don't want it on those inner parts. I definitely don't want it down here like that. So just where it could logically actually appear. And then the other thing I'll do, because this is where you sort of get a little bit artistic, but yeah, you don't want to have like constant values anywhere. So I'm just going to use like single clicks to just say like no sprinkles here or less sprinkles, right? So I'm giving a lower strength value. And then I'll just do a few little, it just makes it, yeah, it just makes what you're creating look more interesting when you've got something that is a little bit more unpredictable than what you would get normally. Okay, so once I finish weight painting, hit Control Tab again, and then go back to object mode. You could also just do it up here, or strength value. Where? So I'm just going to you don't want to have like constant values anywhere. So I'm just going to use like single clicks to just say like no sprinkles here or less sprinkles, right? So I'm giving a lower strength value. And then I'll just do a few little, it just makes it, yeah, it just makes what you're creating look more interesting when you've got something that is a little bit more unpredictable than what you would get normally. Okay, so once I finish weight painting, hit Control Tab again, and then go back to object mode. You could also just do it up here, by the way. Okay, let's turn on our geometry nodes. So how do I get that reflected on my mesh? How do I use that vertex group, which by the way, we might as well rename it, sprinkles density. How do I use that? Once I finish weight painting, hit Control Tab again, and then go back to object mode. You could also just do it up here, by the way. Okay, let's turn on our geometry nodes. So how do I get that reflected on my mesh? How do I use that vertex group, which by the way, we might as well rename it, sprinkles density. How do I use that in my density right here? Now, I was asking Arundel about this. I imagine at some point there would be a node that you could reference the weight paint group. At the moment, this is the only way to do it. We drag this value into this blank input down here of our group input, okay? Now what this does, this is actually a really, really handy thing, not just for this, but for anything. This is exposing a value. When we take something from here and we put it into one of these blank things, what it's also doing is it's putting that value over here in your modifier stack. So now I've got access to that density value over here so that I don't have to jump to my geometry nodes. If I want to change the density of my sprinkles later on, I can just play with it right here without having to open up the full thing, right? Really, really handy. Next to it is a box, and this is the box that is important. It is the weight paint box, or the vertex group, or is it, maybe it's just any attribute. Anyways, you'll see that if I click that little thing, it changes from a number to basically a text field, and then you can reference different attributes of the object. The one that we're looking for, of course, is the one that we have called sprinkles density. All right, now when I did that, what exactly happened? Nothing. And that is because it has assigned a value
Wait a minute. Which one did you call sprinkled?
into this blank input.
Density.
Down. Might as well rename it, by the way. Okay, let's turn on our geometry nodes and then go back to how do I get that reflected on my mesh? How do I use that vertex group, which, by the way, we might as well rename it, sprinkles.
Oh, okay. This.
Density. How do I use that in my density right here? Now, I was asking Arundel about this. I imagine at some point there would be a node that you could reference the weight paint group. At the moment, this is the only way to do it. We drag this value into this blank input down here. If I click that little thing, it changes from a number to basically a text field, and then you can reference different attributes of the object. The one that we're looking for, of course, is the one that we have called sprinkles density. All right, now when I did that, what exactly happened? Nothing. And that is because it has assigned a value of 0 to 1. Okay, whereas previously, before, we were using values of 50,000. So I would need to convert my 0 to 1 to a 50,000 thing, which I could do with a math node. Okay, so that was a utility, math. Set this to multiply, and then put this in here. And then if I added in 50,000, now I would get that only appearing where it needs to be. Ta-da! Isn't that great? So,
On the front shoes, all getting ran through. Yeah, right, ball with it. Yeah, I'm in a crank call with it. Yeah, I made phone calls with it. Yeah, I made prank calls with it. Yeah, in H-Town lately, where you find me? Yeah, Ride City, no ID. Yeah, back of the Benz, where I found peace. Yeah, peace popular and need notchiness. I'm blue up in them. Smoke some, drink some power. Smoke some, drink some power. Smoke some, drink some pop one. 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 Smoke some, drink some pop. Smoke some, drink some, pop one. Smoke some, drink some, pop one. Smoke some, drink some, pop one. Smoke some, drink some, pop one.
And then if I wanted to, I could also take this value and plug this in over here. And then now this controls my density, right? It's like, it's my... exposed density of this thing. Oh, and it's also, yeah, I guess it's got a maximum. I mean, this is the other thing. Like, we're going to change this in a second because there's another problem that we've now got. Okay, so it looks cool, but how do we stop the clipping? Clipping. Each of these sprinkles is intersecting with other sprinkles. How on earth can we fix it? Well, we couldn't previously with particle nodes. We were just out of luck. We would have to just play with this seed value. The seed value, by the way, if you're not aware, it's like it's just a single value that it's infinite variations. So if you don't like the orientation, the distribution, you could just hit this until you find something that you like. And that was my advice for the previous particle nodes. And it will still be my advice, but there is something that will help us right here. This is the first instance where we've got an advantage over particles. It's not just random distribution, but something called Poisson disk distribution. Poisson. There's no W in it, but I was told that that's how you say it. I guess it's French. When we use this, okay, first of all, we've lost something, okay? We've got some new, so let's just talk about this a little bit. Okay, so we've got, by default, it'll be set to 0, and the density max is probably set to, I think, 10. That's probably what yours is. But if we set this to 50,000, that is now identical to the random distribution, okay? So random, Poisson disk, density max is the exact same thing as your density value. What Poisson disk gives us as an addition is something called distance min. And the way this works is each of these points, right? Say that's a point right there. It's going to create a radius around it. So if I was to just increase this to something really small, because this is meters, so we're working on like 10 centimeter scale, it's going to create a radius around it. And then if there's a point inside that radius that's near this one, it's going to cancel that point. So it's going to delete that point. And then of course, obviously if I increase the size of my radius, it's now going to find more points and it's going to delete that point as well. So what I want to do is just keep increasing this until, I'm using annotations, I turn that off. Until it starts to look plausible. Now the thing is it's still not perfect because it doesn't know the rotation of these points. It doesn't know what this object size is. All it knows is that there is a point there and it's creating things and it's canceling out that point. But sprinkles, obviously, if two of them are like side by side, it shouldn't be canceled out, right? Because they're not intersecting, okay? But it doesn't know the rotation of it. So really, the only way to fix this would be for Blender to have something called circle packing or some sort of packing algorithm so it could read what the size of the objects are and then try to arrange them so that they're not intersecting. Currently, the two options we have with this method is to increase it to a really high amount so that even the 2 points couldn't touch each other end to end like that. But then it doesn't look realistic because the spacing is too big. So what I suggest is use something that is a little plausible, like you've still got them pretty close together and you'll get rid of most of the clipping this way, but then the seed value, you want to change that until you got something that it's like there's not as much clipping. So my advice is still pretty similar to before, but at least it's better because we've got the radius. So it'll detect most of the clips and it'll get rid of it, but you want to find something that
always find his way back home, and it's so true. Later on, fall through and pop one. You know the motto, smoke something, drink something, pop one. Got your hand on my Glock while your ass ride shotgun. High stakes, risk it every day. I know fucking ugly niggas just not fun. Had to zero out the fade cause I'm not one. So smoke some, drink some, pop one. 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 Yeah. Smoke some, drink some, pop one. 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 On the front steps, all getting ran through. Yeah, back, ball with it. Yeah, I'm in a crank call with it. Yeah, I made phone calls with it. Yeah, I made prank calls with it. Yeah, in H-Town lately, where you find me? Yeah.
It will not have as much intersection. But don't bother with that now because it's going to change as we do more things. All right, so what I want to do now is I want to, because I haven't, you can see we've still got we're not using the weight paint group anymore. So when you're using, if you're just using random, you would use this, the weight paint group, which as you might remember is this. So it's using our I hope this isn't too confusing. Sprinkles density vertex group. So if we wanted to use it in random mode, we would use that. But in Poisson disk, we want to instead put it into density factor, which is conveniently a value between 0 and 1. So we don't even need to do any multiplication or anything. It's now, this is our density, this is our weight paint group. So in fact, if we want to tidy this up, we could say weight paint, okay? And then this one, we will say sprinkle density. Okay, and then sprinkle density is going to be driving our density max. So actually, I actually like Poison Disk more because you get random. It just like puts it all into one thing, and you have to do a bunch of nodes to mix it up. But Poisson Disk will give you these extra things, so it's a lot nicer. Cool. Let's clean this up a little bit better, actually.
Man,
now, here's something else. We've got this density factor now. It multiplied this value, which is 50,000 roughly, by another 10,000. Get your density max amount variations to our cylinders, making them look more realistic. And so our donut is referencing a single sprinkle. It's doing a good job. We set it all up correct. Of level 1. Control 2 would do subsurf modifier, which you may remember we've used a lot, really. So for that, you could go in here and add it as a modifier. But the hotkey, if you want to know that, it's Control 1. That'll add in a subsurf of level 1. Control 2 would do level 2, 3, 4, etc. So I'm just going to go Control 1. Whoops. 1. Okay. And also make sure render is just set to 1 because we definitely don't need that much detail for our final render. All right, now it's doing this weird pinching thing, but that makes sense for our mesh because you may remember when we talked about subsurf. It's like the way it works is it takes 3.
Oh, there we go.
Vertices like that, in which case this is a right angle, and then it is blending the two across it like that. So of course it's going to look very pinched going that way. So what we need to do is add in more detail here. So I'm going to add in a loop cut. Okay, so I don't think we talked about this, but a loop cut is it's basically what this is right here. I want to make one happen here, and to do that I'm going to hit Control R. In fact, let me just turn on my tool so it's actually handy. Control R, there we go. And you'll get this little yellow line that'll appear. So that'll ask you like which part of the mesh do you want to put it on. So I want to put it here, click, and then I want to drag this over to the left-hand side and then do another click, and then I'm going to hit Control R again, click, and then drag this over for the other end. And now that looks a lot better. And if I went and hit Shade Smooth, you should see that our sprinkles look a lot nicer now. If you really want, like, you can kind of see I mean, can you see it? But it looks a little messy in the end there. I mean, if you were really like a narc for like making things look really nice, you would add like an inset here to just clean up that end a little bit better. But look, I mean, that's gonna it's gonna slow down your render, and you've got it for every sprinkle, and it's like, yeah, who cares? So we're just gonna go with that. Okay, cool. So let's add some variants of this. Okay, so we've got single sprinkle. In fact, might as well just rename this over here, sprinkle. And then I'm going to duplicate it with Shift D, and then I'm going to put it right next to it, just on its X axis, like that. Doesn't matter where you put it, by the way. It's just I'm trying to keep it neat. And then looking at reference, you can see that, wow, you got some really long ones. Okay, so let's do.
This guy is a perfectionist, right? I just want to know how to use the tool, so I can give it to y'all later, honestly. I think I'm gonna just hold on.
Do that. Sprinkle, in fact, it's like it's gonna inset here to just clean up that end a little bit better. But look, I mean, that's gonna it's here to just clean up that.
Smoke some, drink some, pop one. 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 So smoke some, drink some, pop one. 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 Tastes good like soul food. Parked up outside in the old school. The new me back with the OU. The dog always find his way back home, and it's so true. Later on, fall through and pop one. You know the motto, smoke something, drink something, pop one. Got your hand on my Glock while your ass ride shotgun.
I don't remember, like, what is it?
I know fucking ugly niggas just not fun.
What is it?
Had to zero out the fade cause I'm not one. So smoke something, drink something, pop one. 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 Yeah. Smoke something, drink something, pop one. Smoke something, drink something, pop one. Smoke something, drink something, pop one. Smoke something, drink something, pop one.
It's funny.
Smoke something, drink something, pop one. On the front steps, all getting ran through. Yeah. Back, ball with it. Yeah. I'm in a crank call with it. Yeah. I made phone calls with it. Yeah. I made prank calls with it. Yeah. In H-Town lately, where you find me? Yeah. Ride around city, no ID. Yeah. Back of the Benz where I found peace. Yeah. Peace popular. And need notchiness. From blue up in them. Smoke some, drink some power. 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 Smoke some, drink some power.
Oh my god, thank you.
Smoke some, drink some power. Smoke some, drink some power. So smoke some, drink some, pop one. Smoke some, drink some, pop one. Smoke some, drink some, pop one. Smoke some, drink some, pop one.
That end a little bit better. Girls look a lot nicer now. If you really want, like, you can kind of see, I mean, can you see it? But it looks a little messy in the end there. I mean, if you were really like a narc for like making things look really nice, you would add like an inset here to just clean up that end a little bit better. But look, I mean, that's gonna, it's gonna slow down your render, and you've got it for every sprinkle, and it's like, yeah, who cares? So we're just gonna go with that. Okay, cool. So let's add some variants of this. Okay, so we've got single sprinkle. In fact, might as well just rename this over here, sprinkle. And then I'm going to duplicate it with Shift D, and then I'm going to put it right next to it, just on its X axis, like that. Doesn't matter where you put it, by the way. It's just I'm trying to keep it neat. And then looking at reference, you can see variants of this. Okay, so we've got single sprinkle. In fact, might as well just rename this over here, sprinkle. And then I'm going to duplicate it with Shift D, and then I'm going to put it right next to it, just on its X axis, like that. Doesn't matter where you put it, by the way. It's just I'm trying to keep it neat. And then looking at reference, you can see that, wow, you got some really long ones. Okay, so let's do that. Let's make, okay, so I'm going to go into wireframe mode so that I can see through it, and then vertex mode, vertex select mode, which you can also do by hitting number 1 on your keyboard, or 2 for the edges, and then 3 for the faces. So 1, 2, or 3. All right, and then I'm going to click over this to box select, and I'm just going to drag this out. And this is going to be a long one. But long ones, when they're long, they kind of get squiggly, I would imagine. Maybe. So I'm going to add in the middle of it, across here is your scroll wheel, sort of like a bucket, so that it then uses it like basically sprinkles. And I'm going to make all of these objects share this one material. You could do it one by one by coming over here and then clicking sprinkles like that, and selecting.
Smoke some, drink some, pop one. 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 Yeah. Smoke some, drink some, pop one. 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 On the front steps, all getting ran through. Yeah. Back, ball with it. Yeah. I'm in a crank call with it. Yeah. I made phone calls with it. Yeah. I made prank calls with it. Yeah. In H-Town lately, where you find me? Yeah. Ride around city, no ID. Yeah. Back of the Benz where I found peace. Yeah. Peace popular. And need notchiness. Boom wop in them.
From the list, or the much faster way, select all the objects you want to have as the new material, then select the object you want to copy the material from last, then hit Control L for link, and then hit link materials. And now they are all using
This
the
isn't
exact same
finished
material.
line?
Aha. Okay, now it might not look like what we want, but let's go to the shading tab. We're going to do something fancy. Okay, so obviously these are now all one solid color, not what we want. What we want.
Vous écoutez bien? Alors, commence.
Whoa, yeah. Shooters round me, I'm winning like I'm Curry and Clay.
We want to do is in here, base color. We want to add something that will randomize the color dependent on what object it is. Like every time the object is referenced, pick a new thing. So the way we can do this is with a object info node. And again, this is one of those things, is like, how would you know this is the one? Because in like geometry nodes, there was a random value node. It's just one of those things. You just have to learn, I guess. But in shading, you use the object info node and then you take the random one at the bottom there. Okay, so I guess it's because it's object data and it's using random object data depending on the object. So I guess it does kind of make sense. Then if I take that and I put that into my base color, what this is doing now is it is referencing between 0 and
People who don't want to stand by themselves deserve nothing free gifted from someone else. Right now I'm thinking and plotting the voice. A Lambo for daily just makes too much noise. Haven't decided with that or the Rari. For me in the future, a regular choice. I had to go on my path. Promised myself as a kid. Yeah. When I get older, I promise that no one will sleep on my shit. Rapping in closets with blankets and pillows set up for the rig. Yeah. Sometimes I feel like I'm buried the way that I'm making these hits.
This ball is crushed.
Yeah, shooters round me, I'm winning like I'm Curry and Clay. Whoa, riding around town, got a couple small things, celebrate these days. Been to places I ain't never seen in person, all they really gotta do is press play. You don't ever see me speak up, means I ain't got nothing nice to say. Yeah, ice like Trey, hits like Dre. You and me, that's night and day. Take no L's, man, it ain't no way. Ooh, yeah.
Oh, hold on.
The way that I'm stuck to this game, you would think that it's
I was
married.
about to say.
A legend, a parable. You tell me.
What the final looks like. I'm gonna render it. Can't see it. Why can't you see the render on my screen? Back to interface. Yeah, that's more like it. Bruh.
File browser. And I personally don't like this setting. I don't like that it opens up these new windows. And so in this video, I'm going to show you how to change that so that it window in Blender. So to change this, just click on edit and then go to Blender's user preferences. And then you're going to click right over here on the interface, and I'm just going to scroll down and you're going to go under editor. So open up the editor and then open up the temporary editors. And you can see there is the render in. So I prefer to change this to image editor, and that is going to just open it up in the image editor, but it won't open up a new window. And then also when you're using the file browser, like when you're saving an image, you can see it's turned to new window on default, but I prefer to use maximized area, and so it's not going to open up a new window. And then if you want to save these preferences so it's in your future Blender projects, just click on the Save Preferences button and that'll save the preferences. So now if I press F12 to render, you can see it's just opened up the image editor. You can see right here, here's the image editor, but it hasn't opened up a new window, and I can just press Escape and then that'll go back to the 3D view. And if I press F11, that's going to take me back to the render result. If I click on Image and click on Save As, you can see that it's opened up Blender's file browser, but again, it hasn't opened up a new window. It's just taken us to the file browser. So then you can just save your image, and that
This is nice. Nice. I'm gonna go with this. No, yeah, I'll go with this. This is perfect. Next time I'll try to make something new that isn't the donut. But this was fun. I'm gonna try and do something else for sure. For sure.
If you've just opened Blender for the first time and then you've tried to do things, maybe.
What? Is this a bug? What?
So, we are going to delete our default cube, which is just the delete key, or X, which is the older shortcut, and we're going to replace it with something new. It's the donut-shaped one, the torus. In this part, we are going to be making our icing look more like icing, as a reflection and everything, depending on what other values are. Looks really good. The one that you're probably looking for just color is base color. A nice pink color, alright? Then the other big one you change a lot is roughness. Okay, and this is the glossiness. So we want to add some sprinkles to our donut, and obviously manually placing them by hand would be absolutely bad.
That was neat. I like that. Damn. Alright, that's it for me for now. Gonna probably be on again in like a second.